Hello everyone, Charcoal here, and welcome to another discussion video. Book 15, The Flames of Hope, is finally out, and it's alright. It's not bad, but I can't help but feel like something about it was oddly unsatisfying. I actually felt the need to read it a second time to try and comprehend what was happening. You might have seen my old reviews of Dragon Slayer and The Dangerous Gift, and yeah, I only read each of those once. Dragon Slayer because it was a 500-page book that I didn't enjoy the first time, so why would I read it again? And The Dangerous Gift because I thought I had a pretty good grasp on the book's events after only one read. I reread The Flames of Hope not because I really enjoyed it, but because after the first time I was left very confused, not understanding most of what happened, and not really knowing how I felt about the book, so I wanted to see if I could make some sense of it. Okay, everything I've said up until now was written before my second read. What do I think after rereading it? Well, I think I have a better grasp on it now, but my opinions on the book haven't changed much. Before I start the review, I want to emphasize that everything I say here is my personal opinion. If you feel a different way about this book, that's fine. There's no right or wrong way to feel about it, I'm just sharing my own thoughts. Now, let's get started. The prologue isn't anything too special. It sets up a future event, but that's about it. But now's as good a time as any to bring up humans again. I've ranted about this before, so I'll keep it brief. I always have and always will hate the idea of humans being important in Wings of Fire. The third arc started off okay and got better, but I don't think it's a coincidence that this series about dragons took a major downturn in my eyes once dragons stopped being the main focus. There is one particular exception though, and I'll get to that later. Before I get into the plot, I want to talk about the new characters who were introduced at the last minute in The Dangerous Gift, Bullfrog and Pineapple. In my video on that book, I guessed that one or both of them would probably be death fodder, but to my surprise, both of them actually lived. But what do I think of their characters? Bullfrog is a walking sack of bricks, not very bright, doesn't do anything, boring character. Typical Mudwing, am I right? On the other side of the spectrum, I really like Pineapple, because he actually does stuff and has a personality exclusive to him. He's outgoing and cheerful on the outside, but keeps a lot of his problems to himself. Sounds like a Rainwing version of Kibble, but the difference is that Pineapple keeps a level head when he's stressed instead of freaking out or making jokes. Also, he's apparently Jambu's boyfriend, so that's neat. He's not super fleshed out, but that's to be expected when he's confined to only this book. And hey, at least what we did get is better than, well, nothing. Anyway, let's start the plot. We get a pretty cool fight scene early on, but I do take some issue with it. Tsunami, Moon, Kibble, and Pineapple are all captured, and then soon after we also lose Sundew and Lynx who go after them. I can understand the point of doing this because it makes the main party less cluttered, but if you're sending 11 characters to be involved in the plot and knowing you'll need to get rid of half of them early on, maybe don't send 11 characters in the first place. And sending them away doesn't even help much because Tui tries to keep focusing on them anyway, but more on that later. Next we meet Axolotl. A major selling point of the book was that it introduced a non-binary human, and here they are. I can't stress enough that I don't have a problem with Axolotl being non-binary. My problem is that being non-binary is their only defining character trait. They have no personality outside of that, and the way they were advertised made it seem like they'd be a major player in the story, only for them to not do anything outside of being a tour guide for a few chapters. They stop being relevant the moment the Abyss stuff starts. The saving grace of this section would have to be Luna's interactions with Cricket. While brief, they show a really interesting dynamic between the two, and I desperately wish it was explored further. That and Dusky is an adorable bean and I love him very much. And fun fact, Blue was originally going to be named Dusky, so it's nice to see the name finally get used. Overall, part 1 is probably the weakest part of the story because it takes up nearly half the damn book and hardly anything happens. The majority of the part is just traveling. You could say this is the calm before the storm, but that's what The Dangerous Gift was supposed to be. I came into The Flames of Hope expecting action, and part 1 only really gave us that in the first few chapters. But if it's action and suspense I wanted, boy did I get my wish in part 2. I think this section can be best described as... What is happening? The whole thing is one huge reveal. We got the story behind the Scorching and know the secret behind the Other Mind's consciousness. Both were caused by one guy, Cottonmouth. Really couldn't have picked a better name for him, huh? And this is the exception to my hatred of humans right here. Oddly enough, he works here specifically because his story is crafted in a way we can mostly believe he's the one behind everything. He's the one who led the campaign of stealing dragon eggs, angering the dragons and leading to the Scorching. He's the one who has been controlling the breath of evil this whole time, using Lizard's leaf speak as a battery to spread it. This is how you make a human character a genuine threat in a series about dragons. This is what the invincible lord from Dragon Slayer should have been, but sadly wasn't. The entire flashback sequence of Cottonmouth's rise to power was probably my favorite part of the book. Let's talk about Lizard/Freedom now. She was definitely the more interesting of the two halves of the Other Mind, but she's not super likable either. Her banter with Cottonmouth is fun for a while, but it gets old fast, as do her tantrums. I do, however, like her change of heart at the end, and I love the psychological horror aspect of this whole pairing. I thought the third arc was pretty tame compared to what came before, but this book fixed that right up. This is easily the darkest Wings of Fire has gotten in years, and it is so refreshing. Unfortunately, my praise of part 2 ends there. The whole mind space thing where they keep Luna and what exactly the other mind can and can't do are kept pretty vague. They try to explain it, but it's just so hard to follow, even after rereading this thing. This is also where Wasp was officially dealt with, but that scene could have and should have been done so much better. Pineapple, of all people, gets to give Wasp the Queen Scarlet treatment, which was unexpected and a nice callback, but it would have been way more satisfying if it was someone who's actually been involved in the arc so far, like Luna or Sundew. I should also mention this is Wasp's only physical appearance in the entire book, so the original villain of this arc was dealt with as an afterthought. Great. And she and Cottonmouth continue to be one-dimensional cookie-cutter tyrant characters. Book 14 gave us a small glimpse of some of Wasp's insecurities that Tui could have used to finally make her an interesting character, but they were never followed up on here. What a waste. It may not be perfect, but I still like part 2. Easily the most interesting part of the story. Unfortunately, this was where the book peaked. Let's move on to part 3. Similar to part 1, this part feels pretty slow, even though it's significantly shorter, and I think that's because there's not much action to get invested in. It's mostly talking and looking into other dragons' happy memories. Why are we being so sappy? It's the climax of the final book against the most threatening villain in the series. Even when there is action, it's hard to be interested in it because Luna isn't there interacting with it. She's literally just watching it happen, and that's the whole problem with Luna in this book. She doesn't do much. She hardly has a character arc and spends a large chunk of the book locked in one long conversation and spectating all the actually interesting stuff. Speaking of which, let's talk about the rest of the team in this book. Pineapple does stuff, Luna, Moon, and Ren sorta do stuff, Sundew and Lynx do one important thing that we don't get to see, Tsunami and Kibble just kinda tag along with Pineapple, and Bullfrog, Cricket, and Sky do absolutely nothing. Again, this is the problem with having so many characters to juggle. Either a few of them get good moments while everyone else gets shafted, or the spotlight is spread too thin and everything feels cluttered, the former being the case here. But did you notice a pattern here? All the characters that get to do the fun and exciting stuff are the ones not in the main party with Luna. 3 of the 5 characters in the main group do nothing. Luna is the protagonist of this book. She should have been more involved in the action. Imagine if she was really there for the long-awaited defeat of Queen Wasp, or even if she got to be the one to melt her face with some flame silk and got emotional about it later like Pineapple did. Imagine if Luna went on the mission to rescue Moon. That would have been a fun little adventure. Certainly more fun than not getting to see the rescue mission at all and instead spending chapter after chapter with Luna talking to Lizard. Speaking of Lizard, I already said she's okay, but now that we're at the moment, I want to talk about her change of heart again. I can't help but feel like this is what should have happened with Darkstalker, realizing and admitting what they did was wrong, accepting a name change, and voluntarily giving up their own life for the greater good. It was a fine enough conclusion to her story, although I really wish the solution to the whole situation wasn't as simple as cutting one vine. And as always, the concept of the mind space and how the Hell Moon was able to access it without being absorbed remains very vague and contrived. Now, let's see how the ending fares. So, how is Pantala doing now that all is said and done? Well, somehow getting a face full of Rainwing venom didn't kill Wasp, but she and her sisters have presumably been locked underground indefinitely, and Lady Jewel is the new Hivewing Queen. I really would have preferred Wasp to have died, but I can live with this. What about the Silk and Leafwings? They're apparently setting up a joint kingdom with an entire assembly as their governing body. This is interesting, because it's the first nation we've seen in Wings of Fire to not be a monarchy, although that does beg the question why they're still calling it the Leaf Silk Kingdom. I do like how the epilogue acknowledges some of the consequences of a power shift this huge, like how the Leaf Silk Kingdom's government spends more time bickering with each other than getting anything done, or how there are still plenty of Hivewings who support Wasp's old regime. Just because you save the world doesn't mean everything's happy and perfect and everyone's gonna automatically change their minds. Real life doesn't work like that, and I'm glad Wings of Fire didn't go that route. As a finale to the third arc, this was fine. As a finale to the entire series, it didn't do that well at all. It doesn't focus on anyone besides the third arc gang and leaves a lot of things pretty open-ended, despite not having a Wings of Fire will continue page like books 5 and 10 did. I think it's clear that Tui can't make up her mind whether to do a 4th arc or not. If this is really the series finale, a more definitive ending would have been a time skip epilogue where we see how everyone's doing years into the future, instead of how only one group is doing only weeks, if not days after the fact. It just doesn't have that sense of closure. However, I still have more to talk about. I would say this book's biggest issue is its pacing. Book 14 didn't do enough in the way of the Othermind plot, so this one was left with a lot to wrap up, and then the first half dragged its feet, so when part 2 starts, everything goes crazy fast. But at the same time, it feels slow, because the audience is stuck with Luna, and Luna isn't getting involved in most of the action. Speaking of Luna, you might have noticed I haven't said much about her character, and that's because she doesn't have much of one. Regardless of how I feel about the other protagonists, they all have some major trait that defines them. The perpetually hungry one, the group muscle, the sassy one, the smart one, the bundle of joy, the bundle of anxiety, the emo, the sociopath learning how to not be a sociopath, the shy roly-poly, the jokester, the pathetic one, the curious one, the fierce but vulnerable one, and the insecure one. Of course, all of them have more going on than just those baseline descriptions, but my point is that they all have something that makes them unique. And then there's Luna, the artist, I guess? It's better than nothing. Her character arc, if you can even call it that, is her learning to be more tolerant and not generalize all Hivewings as being evil, as if we didn't already get that with Sundew. You could say I'm being too harsh, but this is a main series protagonist, and thus should be held to the highest standards, and personally, I don't find Luna to be that enjoyable as a protagonist. Now it's time for my final verdict, and I'm honestly torn here. This book showed a lot of promise, but was let down by plot contrivance, vague explanations, and screwy pacing. I think that sums up the entire third arc. Great concepts that were overall executed poorly. I really want to just call this a bad book and move on with my life, but it doesn't feel right to. It wasn't lazy like Dragon Slayer, and it didn't have any moments that particularly infuriated me like The Dangerous Gift. When I read The Flames of Hope, I still felt like I was reading Wings of Fire. I can't say for sure what it is, but I got a certain vibe from it that I just didn't with other recent releases. And so my overall opinion on book 15 is right in the middle, 5 out of 10. I didn't like the book much, but I can't bring myself to score it any lower. Even if it does end up being the end, part of me is happy about that. I'd rather see the series end on an okay note instead of getting dragged out and becoming worse. And again, everything I've said here is just my opinion. I very likely am not going to change the minds of anyone who likes this book, and I'm not trying to. If you like it, more power to you. I'm just putting my own thoughts out there for the same reason anyone does anything, because I can. Even if The Flames of Hope is the last main series book, that doesn't mean it's the end of Wings of Fire as a whole, far from it. More Legends or Winglets could still be on the table, the Arc 2 graphic novels are in the works, the Netflix series still has no release date, but it's supposedly coming out later this year, don't quote me on that though. And of course there's a Guide to the Dragon World coming March 2023. We still have plenty to look forward to in the future, and as a certain green silkwing once said, I can't wait to see what that future is like. And that's it. Time for fan art. We've got pieces from Miss Kyranus, Yuki, another from Miss Kyranus, JoJo Arts, and another from JoJo Arts. Thanks a bunch guys, and if any of you want to submit your own fan art, you can do so in my Discord server. This has been Wings of Charcoal, and I will see you all in the next video.